A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to Jesus. But the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So to them, Jesus addressed this parable. A man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me." So the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country, where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? But here am I, dying from hunger. I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But his father ordered the servants, 'Quickly, bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fatted calf and slaughter it. Then let us celebrate with a feast, because this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' Then the celebration began. Now the older son had been out in the field, and on his way back, as he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what this might mean. The servant said to him, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf, because he has him back, safe and sound.' He became angry, and when he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. He said to his father in reply, 'Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughter the fatted calf.' He said to him, 'My son, you are here with me always, and everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Have you ever noticed that sometimes it's hard to walk by a mirror without looking at it? We just want to see what we look like. I caught myself yesterday doing that. I was standing around in a place with a couple other people, and there was a mirror It was not quite angled at me. And during the conversation, I found myself backing up, trying to see myself in the mirror. Like, it was weird. Or if you're scrolling through pictures or a photo album, you have a tendency to just kind of look for where you are in the pictures. You could be in a whole crowd of people. You could care less about those people. You want to see what you look like. You want to see where you are. We have, my office is in the Emmaus Center next door. And I've got glass window looking out over Monaco and over I can see the statue of the risen Christ out here. And, but the windows are super tinted. And so from the outside, they just look reflective. And it's funny, every now and then I see people walking from the church that way, and they'll stop by the glass, and they'll look at their hair, and they'll adjust their clothing. Only twice can I remember where someone actually walked across the grass to come real close to the glass and examine their face real close. We just have this tendency, we want to know what we look like. We want to know how we are. And I think maybe therapists would analyze that in a particular way, but I would say on a spiritual level, if we were to apply that to our spiritual life, there's something about that that's good. We should be curious how we are in our spiritual life. How do we look to the Lord? How do we look in reality? Because I know what I think I look like, but how do I look in reality? And I think sometimes the Lord gives us scriptures, especially at Mass. It's Him holding up the mirror, saying, look, this is how you look like. And I think intentionally Jesus is doing that with the parable of the prodigal son. Now, with the parables, they're intended to be these kind of simple and impactful images that help us to understand the kingdom of God, help us to understand the love of God. And this parable certainly does that. But this one, maybe more than all the other parables, also has a way of showing us ourselves. Like we're being shown ourselves in a mirror. Because there's two sons. And we're all really familiar with the parable of the prodigal son, right? The prodigal son, the younger son, demands his inheritance from his dad. Now that's pretty offensive, because an inheritance is something you get when your parents pass. So to demand it now is another way of saying, I wish you were dead, because I want what's mine when you die. That's a pretty harsh thing to do to a parent. But the father's patient. The father gives him his inheritance. And he goes and he wastes it on a life of dissipation. As the older son tells us later, he wastes it on prostitutes. And so he spends his inheritance on pleasures that ultimately don't lead to any happiness. He finds himself poor. He finds himself unhappy. He's feeding pigs, and he wishes he could eat the food that the pigs are eating. He's reached such a low. And he realizes he doesn't have much option. He needs to go back home, kind of with his head hanging low, a little embarrassed, to now ask for his father's forgiveness. So he gathers up the courage to make a confession, and we even hear him practice what he's going to say to his father when he gets there. He practices his confession. And he comes to his dad, but he gets to the edge of the property, and his dad can see him far away. The dad runs to him and embraces him and kisses him and puts a ring on his finger and throws a celebration for him. He's home now. He didn't even let the son get through his full confession. It was like halfway through it, and the son and the father was just already embracing him and having the fattened calf slaughtered so they could have a celebration. Then the older son finds out. The older son's jealous, a little angry, because he's always been with his dad. He never abandoned. He never demanded his inheritance. He's always been a good son, and he's angry that dad's throwing a celebration for him. In a way, the Lord's asking us to notice that we've probably got a little bit of one of those two in us right now. Maybe we're the prodigal son. At any point in the prodigal son story, maybe we're at that point where we're wasting away all the blessings that God has given to us, spending it on pleasures and spending it on who knows what, not giving God any glory. Maybe that's where we are. Maybe we've reached the lowest point of our life, and we're just grasping for anything with meaning. We're just like that prodigal son, feeding the pigs, wishing that he could eat what the pigs were eating. Like he's reached the bottom. I've met a lot of people like that. There's a lot of us in this room who've been in that place at some point in our life. And there's probably somebody here right now who's in that place right now. Maybe we're in that place of finally kind of getting up the courage to go ask the Lord for forgiveness. We're beginning to prepare our confession. We know it's Lent, we got to go to confession, right? Maybe we're building up that courage to begin to make that change in our life. Or maybe we're just now experiencing the Lord's embrace. We're experiencing his forgiveness, his mercy, the fact that he's welcomed us home, and we just want to thank him for all he's done. So maybe we identify with the prodigal son, or maybe we identify with his older brother, who's really resentful that the father seems so good to other people and not to him. You ever been in that place? I've been in that place a lot of the time. I'm so resentful sometimes that God seems to be so generous with other people. Why is it that my life is this way? Why is it that they get these things and I don't get these things? Lord, I've always been faithful to you. I've always been with you. How come I don't get X, Y, or Z? Probably in a way, we're supposed to acknowledge that we've got a little bit of both of them in us. At times we're the prodigal son, at times we're the older brother. But the Lord is trying to show us where we are, because both of them have some room for growth, at least at certain times in their life. And he's trying to invite us to a new conversion. Really, I guess what stays with me the most is no matter which brother we identify with, the Father doesn't change. He's the same Father who loves his children perfectly. He loves them with an unconditional love. And no matter how we come to him, whichever brother we identify with, however we come to the Father, he wants to embrace us and kiss us and put a ring on our finger and throw a celebration that we are with him. Everything that he has is ours. So today we ask God humbly to show us ourselves, to hold up that mirror and show us how God sees us. And then to remember, we ask for the grace to remember that when he sees us, he always sees his children that he loves very much.